Great, thank you so much, and thank you to the Portsmouth Public Library, our sponsor for today's event. I also would like to recognize New Hampshire Humanities, who provided a grant that made this program possible. So welcome, everyone. We're so glad you're here. This is a great crowd. Thank you for coming out, and thanks to folks online for being with us for a really important discussion about closer to the edge policing and criminal justice in New Hampshire. We are delighted to be here and with all of you to learn and talk together. There will be questions today, we're sure, and if we can ask you to hold those till the Q&A session at the end, that will facilitate our discussion. I also want to just mention this is the last of our Tea Talks this month in Portsmouth. Thanks everyone for being part of them. We have 2 more Tea Talks this year, both on Sundays, one on Sunday, March 10th at the Keene Public Library, one on Sunday, April 21st in Nashua, the Nashua Public Library. So we hope you all can be with us there in person, if you can make the drive, or online if you can't. So with that, I'm going to say it's tea time and introduce you to Julian Jefferson, Clinical Assistant Professor at Franklin Pierce College of Law, who is our moderator today. And thank you, Julian.
All right. All right, can everybody hear me okay? All right. So it is a pleasure to be here with you all. The new U.S. Senator from the state of California recently gave an interview, and she remarked that public service is the rent we pay for the lives that we get to lead. And that kind of succinctly summarizes why I'm here today. I have been fortunate to be at a position of privilege. That has not always been the case. And I've been very fortunate in recent years to engage in public service. And public service does come at a price, especially in our current climate of this, this hyper-partisanship, this polarization, this us versus them. Engaging in public service comes at a price. But I also know that it's worth it. And I know that because of my work in the Lee Act Commission, which was formed here in New Hampshire in the wake of the death of George Floyd. And our governor brought together people from law enforcement and stakeholders of the community to work together. We did this during the height of COVID, and it was hard. People came in with levels of distrust, of levels of, can I work with this person? And the conversations were hard, because the problems that we confront are hard. And over Zoom, week by week, month by month, we built that trust with one another. Director Skippa was on the commission with me. There were times I wanted to jump through the computer and grab him by the collar, and trust me, the feeling was mutual. But that was the beginning of the road. The end of the road was meeting after meeting, we would slowly build trust and respect for one another. That then led to us finding common ground. That then led to us having 48 recommendations to the governor and the legislature, unanimously supported by everyone on that committee, and save one, they have all been implemented. So that's a good thing. And so having these conversations to me is worth it. We've got to confront hard issues, but we got to talk to each other and not past one another. And I think this is a great panel in which to do that. So I will sort of end with this as sort of one observation that sprung to mind about this topic specifically. So this relationship with policing and communities of color in New Hampshire and the criminal justice system at large. One of the bright spots that we currently have in Manchester, New Hampshire, is we created a young adult court program, and that is for young men ages 18 to 24. And the recognition is that the criminal responsibility is a real thing, but we're also acknowledging that communities are systems, they have inputs, and those inputs in large part determine outcomes. And we have to honestly deal with the inputs that we have in these neighborhoods that have high crime, high poverty, high substance abuse, and high cyclical levels of criminality. And what is the root causes? So instead of us throwing down the hammer of sending these young men to jail or prison, we are now saying, let's get that high school diploma. Let's put you into the My Turn program. Let's give you internships. Let's make sure you don't have a felony conviction that is going to follow you for the rest of your life. And that would have not been created had it not been for sort of the hard work of the LEAC Commission that sort of started to build this trust. Because for that to come into effect, Manchester Police has to trust members of the community, and members of the community have to trust Manchester Police. And so we have a long way to go. Don't get me wrong as I'm talking about all of these good things. You know, it cannot be that all cops are bad and abolish the police, because in my view, that is unsustainable and not a credible argument. On the other side of the fence, it's also not a credible argument to say that it's just one bad apple or this doesn't happen in New Hampshire. Those are also not credible arguments. So coming together like this, having these conversations, hearing from the community, brainstorming, coming up with ideas, it is my hope that we can continue to move the conversation forward. And with that, I'm going to have all the panelists introduce themselves, and then we are going to go in order. They're all going to do presentations here from the podium, and then we're going to open it up for Q&A. I would also remind you, Q&A is at the end, okay? So if people jump in, I'm going to put my judicious hat on and divert it back, okay? But we will have time for Q&A. So I think what I'm going to do is I'm just have everybody come up one at a time, introduce themselves, and do their presentations. And we're going to do it in the order that they're in. So I was just briefly introduce them. I'm going to have them introduce themselves as well. So we have Judge Ruoff. Judge Ruoff currently sits in the Rockingham County Superior Court. Prior to the bench, he was in the defense bar as well. And we have Detective Jones, correct, Detective Jones of the Portsmouth Police Department. And then we have Director Skipper of the Police Standard and Training Council, and for people, that is our police academy, for lack of a better word. So we're gonna have everybody come up one by one, give you their sort of perspective on what we're here to talk about today, and then the important and equally important part of opening it up for a community conversation. All right, and with that, Judge Ruoff. Thank you.
Yay, Your Honor.
All right, thank you, Professor. One thing Julian is, Julian's very good at many things. One thing he's not good at is blowing his own horn. I should let you all know that Julian's also was an instrumental member in trying to form with Judge Delker a teen court or older teen court in Manchester for young men. Because there are problems that we found that arise specifically with young men between 18 and 25 that the court system should take into account. And Julian was integral in setting up that affinity or problem-solving court, which is now I think in its second year. So well done. I'll give you a round of applause for that. Okay, my name, just a couple minutes about myself. My name is Judge David Ruoff. My real first name is David. And I'm the supervising judge at the Rockingham County Superior Court. Prior to that, I sat out in Cheshire County for a number of years. I've been a judge for 8 years now. Prior to that, I was in civil practice for a number of years, mostly doing defense work, criminal defense work. I started my career 28 years ago as a public defender. And then I switched sides and I became a prosecutor. And I was a prosecutor, actually Rockingham was where I started, and Portsmouth was one of the towns I prosecuted for. Then I became a homicide prosecutor at the AG's office for a number of years and handled many, many different things. So I've been around a while, and Now I'm sitting in the Superior Court. I've also was president of the bar, been on the ethics committee for many, many years, and I'm currently, and this is why I'm probably here today, the co-chair for the judicial branch's diversity and inclusion steering committee. A couple years ago, you can go to the next slide, the Chief Justice Gordon MacDonald, who's our new Chief Justice, in response to the LEAC Commission and a lot of other things going on, said we as a judicial branch need to take a close look to see how we're functioning and what we're doing, because we are the only branch of government, believe it or not, with a constitutional mandate to treat everybody fairly. It's baked into our Constitution. And no other branch of government has that express obligation in the Constitution. And it's easy to think that in New Hampshire, because we were just going along swimmingly apparently, or not, that there's nothing here. AG Barr once commented, I don't see any problem with the Department of Justice. I've never seen any bias or racial discrimination. Well, that doesn't mean it's not there, as we all know. And it's the unseen bias, the unseen discrimination that is the real enemy. Dealing with the obvious bias is something that's easy to do. And if you need any reaffirmation that it's alive and well in Rockingham County, I'll give you an anecdote. And last summer, I was picking a jury for a man who was charged with sale of a narcotic drug that resulted in the death of a young woman. The man charged was black, and he was from Goffstown, New Hampshire. During the jury selection process, and I had 75 people in my courtroom randomly selected from Rockingham County, probably about 6 came up and said, I can't serve as a juror because it's a drug case, he's black, and I believe he's guilty already. 6 out of 75 people in my room came up and said that. 1 or 2 may have been trying to get out of jury service, but it's pretty sad that they were willing to say that to get out of jury service. But I think a few others were honestly not sure that they would be able to be fair in that case. Now, I'm sure some statistician can give you the numbers about how many other people were out there that didn't say that. But I'm glad to say it probably wasn't an issue in that case because the jury that eventually was in panel acquitted him. So he did get a fair trial. But back to the strategic plan. Over the course of 8 months, I met with my co-chair, who is now retired, Justice Susan Carbon, from the Circuit Court, came up with a strategic plan for the state of New Hampshire's judicial branch, and it was approved by the Supreme Court. If you want to go to the next slide, please. In that statement, we articulated our vision statement for the judicial branch, and our vision statement is not really that complicated because it came right from the express language of our Constitution, which is, to ensure that the judicial branch exemplifies all the ideas of a free democracy. And those are the 2 provisions that really govern everything that we do. So for the judicial branch, and I know there's a lot of politics about D&I or DEI programs, and our Chief Justice and everyone in our steering committee is firmly committed to the notion that it's not a political issue for the judicial branch at all. It is the reason we exist. It is the reason that we swear an oath to protect the Constitution and make sure everybody gets treated fairly. And so the next issue is, well, what's our mission then to make sure that we achieve that constitutional objection? That'd be the next slide. I don't think they gave me a clicker.
Yes, I'm right there, it's right there too.
Oh, that's what
I'm
this
sorry,
is.
I was supposed to
Okay.
take it.
Oh, boy.
I failed in my duty.
All right. See me after class.
Oh, is that what you're looking for? I thought you
Sorry
just
about
wanted
that.
a pen. I got a pen.
All right, so this is our mission statement, and you can read it if you want, but it's actually on our website, and I'll get to that in just a second. But if you go to the website, all of it, the whole strategic plan is up there if anybody wants to take a look at it. And we broke down what our mission is, and this is what we've been doing as a committee and as a branch for the last 2.5 years, working towards this end, is trying to achieve all 6 of these objectives right here. Create the workplace and courthouse culture that embraces these issues. Engage in a self-examination, which is what we've been doing a lot of. That's a lot of work. And that's where it overlaps mostly with what we'll talk about here in policing. And identify and remediate areas of systemic racism, collaborate with other entities, take affirmative steps to self-monitor, engage in public outreach to learn. Just curious, who here outside of court has met a judge? Okay, well, that's good, that's good. Must be Judge Pendleton. He's from Portsmouth, he gets out a lot. Am I right about that? He's also a coach. Judges, for the most part, tend to silo themselves off. And under our new Chief Justice, I believe that is changing for the better. He wants us to become more active in our communities, more visible in our communities, and I think that's a very, very, very good thing. And it'll certainly help with this mission that we have embarked on. So if you go to the next, oh, sorry. There we go. So I broke down these to the different types of, we're 6 different tasks that we want to do and how we're going to roll it out. We've started by offering mandatory training for all of our staff, the first and third Wednesdays of every month. That's never been done before in the history of the judicial branch. So we have D&I experts that come in and train us, and they have trained the trainer sessions because many of the judges are leaders in their courts as well, and so are the clerks, and we need to understand how to facilitate difficult conversations around the water cooler, quite frankly. You know, I've lived in New Hampshire since I was 4. I was never taught to talk about race. I wasn't ever taught to talk about sexual orientation or any of the things that kind of come up in the context of cases in the criminal context. So you have to learn how to have a discussion about it, and not everybody's comfortable with it. So it's an ongoing process. And the biggest obstacle we have is convincing everybody in the judicial branch that this is an us problem, not a them problem. That it is something that we have to live with, and it's not something that affects other people and other people only. So training is the key centerpiece for our internal work. Our external work, as you'll see in a couple of slides here, we've started to have these kind of listening sessions or community engagement sections where judges get out and they do some outreach with a focus on D&I. I'll get to that more in just a second. There's also efforts that we've been undertaken to kind of increase our own diversity. Judges, we're kind of restricted because we don't control who becomes a judge. The judicial branch has no control over that. That is purely, as you probably read in the newspapers, an executive branch determination with the advice and consent of the legislative. So we don't control as a judicial branch who becomes a judge. But we can influence who becomes a lawyer. And we can influence who wants to become a lawyer. So a lot of our outreach programs are geared towards, believe it or not, the high school levels and the law school levels. We try to recruit interns now nationally. We try to use double-blind applications so there's no affinity bias or any type of implicit bias that comes along with the interview or application process. By the time we've selected somebody, we haven't even seen what they look like now. And it's yielded very, very good results. Which way do I point it? Oh, there we go. Okay.
I'm having you work out.
I've
all
already
the kinks.
just, well, it's the button to the right, oddly. So engage in public outreach and address institutional racism and cultural bias. We're in the process of collecting data. We did a big internal survey last summer. We got a grant from the National Center for State Courts to survey. We have 850 people that work in the judicial branch. 720 of them, I believe, responded to the survey. I don't know if any of you do survey work. That's an amazing response rate. Our analysts hadn't really heard of such a response rate, so we got a lot of really good data. And that's the next step. It's here, well, it's the back one, sorry. Institutional racism and cultural bias. The next step is trying to take the data externally. We have a survey that we're going to launch in about 60 days for people that use the court system. That would be you all. And the people that would be, you get a QR code. It's kind of like, how did you enjoy the experience? And ask you a bunch of questions. We know that. There's a way our statisticians, our analysts tell us we can debunk or kind of remove the outliers that are not happy with how things went. But because not everybody's happy. Very rarely are people happy when they leave court, except for the lawyers. So it's really important for us to know, what people think. Data collection is really, really important. It's one of the things the court system does worst at, particularly when it comes to racial data. particularly when it comes to racial data and outcome in criminal cases. There is none. We don't even, we collect it, but we don't collate it. So the next effort, we just hired a data analyst to help create architecture for us to funnel all the data we have for every criminal arrest, every criminal prosecution. All our information comes from the point of arrest when the police enter that information. It gets imported to the state system now. We're working on a way to try to figure out how to figure out that. Because the state court system has been decentralized for 300 years. Computerized for only realistically about the last 15. So trying to compile all the data until Chief Justice McDonald made it a priority wasn't anything that the court system had any interest in, wasn't anything that it did. So that's the next step, is trying to collate and see what trends we can learn from the data that exists. So that's our ongoing work. Enhanced internal and external communication. We actually have a communications department now, trying to let the community know what the judicial branch is doing to address these issues, how we're being responsive, how we work, trying to be transparent. I don't know if you've all noticed or read, but the public perception of the judiciary nationwide is at an all-time low, and it's falling. And there are reasons for that that are beyond the state of New Hampshire's control, and there's nothing that we as judges in New Hampshire can control that, other than to control what our community thinks of us. So that's why we've kind of come up with a communications plan and a way to kind of get out into the community and so people can see us and provide input. This is our website. So if you want to just kind of go to the link there and click on it, you'll see that you have links to all the different things that the court system is actually doing. We have 2 people that are responsible for making sure this is kept up to date, so it's not one of those state websites that you click on and all the data is 3 years old. It's fairly up to date so that you can know and see what we're doing and have a calendar of events. These are some of the things that we've held already. The gentleman in the bottom center, if you don't know him, is Chief Justice Gordon MacDonald of the Supreme Court. And some of these are from some of the high school outreach, some of the community events that we've attended. An outreach program that we did in Manchester is at the top. I didn't even see that slide with that guy in the beard on the top right. I shouldn't have put that one in. But we have many more. We're working on one with the NAACP and Black Lives Matter that hopefully we'll schedule in March. We're going to try to do 4 a year going forward. We had one in Nashua about 2 months ago where we had a very good reception, where we broke down and had 6 judges, 1 at each table, and had members from the community come and talk about issues. We wanted to hear what they had to say about all things. Diversity is more than just race, but race is a large part of it, and it's something that we have to take into account and learn how to deal with and be more open about. Thank you for being here. I think I am out of time. And if you have any questions after this, feel free to talk to me. I can't talk about pending cases, and I would prefer not to talk about school funding. Thank you very much.
Next, we're going to bring up Detective Jones. Before I do that, I would be remiss if I didn't toot the horn of Chief Justice Gordon MacDonald. I met him when he was Attorney General MacDonald, and he was the one who put me on the LEAC Commission when the community said we need more diversity on that commission. So I think we need to recognize him, so I wanted to recognize Chief Justice MacDonald, who is doing good work in our state. And with that, turn it over to Detective Jones.
Hi there, I'm Detective Rochelle Jones. I see a lot of familiar faces and some new faces. Born and raised in Portsmouth. I've been with the Portsmouth Police Department for 21 and a half years. Prior to that, I was in the Army. I was a prison guard at Fort Leavenworth. I met the police because I was a juvenile delinquent, and I saw what they were doing. Those officers had a good influence on me, and I decided that's what I wanted to do. I wanted to make a difference. And before I became a Portsmouth police officer, I also worked at Stratford County Department of Corrections. I worked at the Chase Home for Children as a residential counselor. I waited tables at Cafe Espresso. I know some of you were advocating to the chief every time he came in, hire that girl, we need that girl. Skipper was actually my cadre when I went through the academy. He was one of the ones making me do push-ups. It was awesome. But another note, I am a person of color. I consider myself biracial. My father is black, my mother is white. I'm the only female police officer that's a person of color at Portsmouth PD. I'm the only female detective right now at Portsmouth. I'm one of 6 female officers, so I know that when I was growing up, like some of you might have been told that as a female and as a person of color, you're gonna have to work 15 times as hard, and sometimes you don't really realize what that means until you actually have to get there, and then you're really frustrated that anybody had to have that talk with you at all. But here we are. So every day, you know, I'm one of those people that talks the walk, walks the talk. Like if you come to me with something, I'm going to follow through on it. I don't think anybody's issue is smaller than anybody else's. I was raised right in this field, and I was told that the people are the police and the police are the people. That is exactly how I feel, and I will be a servant to this community for as long as I'm alive, because I wouldn't be here if it wasn't for all of you. And that's the truth. I would not be who I am, and I would not be able to do this job if I did not have community support. And people ask me, I know that my hardest time was in probably 2015. It was after Ferguson. And I remember I had some ideas about getting the community leaders together. Pastor Hilson was a huge mentor to me and friend and father figure. And, you know, I had these ideas about having our community leaders have these racial talks. And I just wasn't met with a lot of support at the time because of personal reasons that some of the administrators had with community members, and that should have been put aside, and it wasn't, and we've learned from that. And I remember going to him and just going, how do you do it? Like, how do you keep going? Because I don't want to do this anymore. You know, and he just looked at me with those words of wisdom, those eyes and that voice, and he just said, we rise. He said, we rise, and I always remember that. So when I go to those places and I get tired and, you know, I have to dig deep, I always remember that conversation that I had with them, and I was thankful to be able to have it. So my main job is community policing, community outreach. I changed my name to community outreach coordinator because when I started doing community policing, they were like, oh, that's your job. And it's like, no, 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 no. It's a philosophy that's all of the officers' responsibility. So I'll go through my slide and just give you kind of like a snippet. You have a handout, and it has like almost 2 pages of a lot of the community outreach and initiatives that we do. We do a terrible job marketing ourselves. We don't want to treat ourselves for some reason. Some police departments, I won't say terrible, it's being recorded, right? I'm so sorry. I'll put a disclaimer on anything I say. No, I'm kidding. I stand by it. I think we could do a way better job marketing ourselves and getting it out there. I talk to my friends, and they're like, I have no idea what you're doing half the time. You're everywhere, right? And we're just not out there promoting this and saying, here's what you have available to you from your department. We're doing better now with putting the policies and that transparency. That's a word that gets thrown around a lot. You really have to follow through with that. Right? You should absolutely know, for the most part, what your department is doing, and you shouldn't be afraid to ask people about that and to approach a police officer, and that's what I try to do. I like to begin and end presentations with quotes. This is going to be my shortest one ever, if anybody's ever been to my presentations or classes. But if you have the courage to connect with people from different races, nationalities, backgrounds, cultures, regions, then you have the power to bring about change in the world. Julian hit it on the head. And the judge did as well, just about when things are brought up, you immediately don't put your ego in your pocket, and officers can sometimes be defensive and say, my friend, the person I work with, would never say something like that, would never do something like that. I refuse to believe they would behave like that. I don't do that. I don't think everybody is a bad person, but I did have somebody come to me through an organization that was a professor that was being harassed. And, you know, it was racial, and she said, I don't know that you don't have white supremacists working in your police department. And I said, I don't know that I don't. And what can I do to be able to connect with you to make sure that you feel comfortable reporting? We ended up doing this over Zoom. I didn't need to know where she lived. I didn't need to know all her personal information, but I was still able to take that report. So we can adjust, we can do those things. You have to feel safe to be able to report things. So community policing defined. Stereo instructions, right? Community policing is a philosophy that promotes organizational strategies, systematic, blah, 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 right? Let's get to the fun stuff. But it's a community partnership. So you have to have community partnerships, organizational transformation, and problem solving, right? You bring a problem to me. If you bring a problem to us, like how can we together fix that, right? Or at least start to fix something, right? We might not have all the answers, but that dialogue has to happen. You may know your community better than I do, right? So you may know something that's unorthodox that I go, okay, yeah, I could come off duty. I could come in plain clothes. Maybe people would feel more comfortable with that. Like, yeah, that's a great idea, right? Anything. So this is Rosalind. I love this girl. I don't know if you ever seen anything about her in the papers nationally. She just was 8 years old and she decided that she wanted to go to every single police department and give us hugs. And she came to Portsmouth and did that. Yeah, she was great. I gave her that shirt too from our basketball league. Yeah, she was wonderful. And at the time it was Chief Murner, and I just loved that picture, you know, of them sitting next to each other. Here's this 8-year-old little black girl sitting next to this white chief, you know, and in all honesty, like, there's a conversation going on there. She has a literal seat at the table right there. And I just think that's amazing, you know, and just how can you can learn so much from our youth, from our kiddos. They have huge voices. I love working with the kids. Just some demographics, right? According to ACS, the racial composition of Portsmouth, 88% white. This is from last year, 4.24% Asian, 2 or more races, other race, you know, and then look at Black and African American, right? Females, 51.5%, and then our senior population, that's actually 60 is considered senior in New Hampshire, so we're way over that as well. I like to put that up there because what I was told years ago is that your community should be, like your police department should be reflective of your community, right? I already see a couple issues with that. Well, maybe Mark Newport's a Black chief, and then you have me. Maybe that is, you know, the 1.5%, right? Which is never enough. I'm not saying that's enough. But then look at the female one too. Like, we're at 6 females out of 70 male officers, right? We're not there either, but we have a lot of work to do, and there are some challenges on getting more minorities and whatnot through the police department that are things beyond my control, and I'll speak to them later if somebody asks that question, hint, hint. Right now, we're down 8 officers, and like I said, female officers. This is my buddy. I'm so sorry that the dog is not here. So now I have another role. This is Mason, but my job is to build and maintain relationships with the public agencies and even the police officers. Sometimes that's even like mediating between police officers and citizens. Sometimes we just do not communicate the same, you know, and so I'll do a follow-up with somebody, and I always tell the public, and I mean it, I'm like, if you feel like you did not have the correct interaction with an officer, please give me an opportunity to correct that, please. And there's times, you know, where people have come to me and said, well, then the officer asked me, like, what do you want me to do about it, you know? And my answer is, in a very nice way, next time, can you please ask that officer what your options are? Right? Because how are you supposed to know? And sometimes, like, I have to ask our community, like, to help prompt some of our officers because they're not thinking like you. And it's really difficult to be one person to serve. I mean, if you look around the room, there's so many different people. I could have gone to a call with every single one of you that are different, and how do I do that, right? How does one person have to be all things to all people? So that can be a challenge, right? I'm up for it. But there's Mason. You can pet him. So he's really to build morale. He's a ham. But you can see the kids right there touching him. Like, I mean, if they don't want to talk to police, if they're afraid of officers, you better believe, get out of the way. Where's Mason? Where's Mason, right? They don't even want me anymore. It's fine. But he's wonderful. That was his first birthday. So yeah, he's definitely, he's my partner. You'll meet him eventually. And some past trainings, like we were talking about in the judge, like you hit the nail on the head again. Like you were talking about how do we learn to talk about things like diversity and gender and race. When George Floyd happened, sometimes when you're a person of color, everybody thinks you're now the department expert. I was not. I actually put myself into Ann Romney's class, Stand Up to Racism. I didn't know what white privilege was. I didn't necessarily know what the right terms were. When I was growing up, I was called mulatto. I was called albino down south because they'd never seen mixed girls with red hair. Like, my dad grew up in an orphanage for colored children in North Carolina, and then he came here after Vietnam. So I got it from all the sides, you know? So sometimes I don't know what the proper terms are. So I don't just go through police training. I put myself into other trainings. NAMI for mental health issues, like even about about drugs and recovery. Like I went through recovery coach training with Safe Harbor. So you take yourself out of it, and that's something that any person can do. That's Reverend Hilson, obviously. And then just some things interdepartment after Floyd that, You know, I recommended to the department where renewal of officers' oaths. I just don't want people to think sometimes, because you don't know that everything didn't come from, I mean, luckily the neighborhood committee came through as well, but I had a conversation with the administration saying, listen, we need to start changing the way we police, or people are gonna come tell us how to do that. You know, here are some suggestions, which to me was renewing our oaths. We should do that every year. We should do it in front of the public, right? Why do we take this job? Yes, I swear to do what I said I was gonna do. Citizen response advocate programs, you shouldn't have to come in by yourself. You come in with a trusted friend that you say that we can talk and have an interview or conversation in front of. Absolutely, you should feel safe. Bring whoever you want. Peer-to-peer response resistance training, we're doing that. That's stepping in and going, hey, you're getting too rough with this person, right? Debriefing for officers, debriefing about things that happen across the nation. Just because Floyd did not happen in Portsmouth does not mean that we should not be having conversations and debriefing about what happened and how do we go out there and police after something happened. The classroom training on systematic racism. We do an online training, right? How great are online trainings? We need those conversations. We did have a training from New Hampshire, I don't want to get it wrong. What is it? The racism bias training, judicial?
Implicit bias?
Okay, yes, thank you. These are just some slides that show the demonstration. This woman was just needed a hug in the middle of it all. And that's the Portsmouth Residents Group, Stephanie Hausman, thank you. Just some things that we've collaborated with, like when we had everything happen at the Seacoast Repertory Theater, like when we had people coming off their drag queens, and we had the NS like 131 there. You know, it's just all these collaborations that we do in the community. And then we do a Cops and Kids, I'll end on this. It's a video, but it's a Cops and Kids that we do at every one of our grade schools, because we're working with littles all the way to seniors, and that's where you're building those relationships and that trust. Will it play? Aww. Oh, you don't get to see it.
Yeah, it usually has like a play icon on it.
All right, well, next slide. Is there another slide? My clicker's not working. All right, next time I'm bringing my own flash drive. No, I'm kidding. Anyway, there's a video that has all of us with the kids and just going up, and they can ask the officers whatever they want, like nothing's off limits or whatnot, and it's just pretty amazing. And then it just ended with another quote about just changing the lives of kids. You can change the world that way. Thank you.
Thank you, Detective Jones. And before I bring up Director Skip, I just want to say to Detective Jones that she is an example of why diversity matters. You know, from a female perspective, from a person of color perspective. My sister is a sergeant commander in the Boston Police Department, and after George Floyd, she had an 18-year-old son who was looking at her with very mixed emotions of looking at her as a member of law enforcement. But that leads to great conversations inside of law enforcement institutions. So when we have persons of color in leadership positions, it is important, and it does matter. So with that, I want to bring up Director Skipper.
Good afternoon, everyone. Thank you so much for having me part of this. It's really nice to see the turnout here. My name is John Skippa, and just to tell you a little bit about myself real quick, I have been a police officer in the state of New Hampshire for about 35 years now. I started here on the Seacoast, started in Rye. I did a short amount of time at the police academy as an instructor, like Jonesy talked about. I think you could probably bang out a few more push-ups than I can at this point. And then after my time at the academy, I came back to the Seacoast and worked as an executive officer, and then ultimately was the chief of the Stratham Police Department. And about that time, thought about retiring. I retired for a short period of time and then ended up running a police academy in Massachusetts. and was there for about a year, and then was very, very fortunate to be appointed as the 6th director of New Hampshire Police Standards and Training. The sad truth is that nobody really knew anything about police standards and training here in New Hampshire. We were kind of this little set-aside organization. We're a standalone executive branch organization of New Hampshire government. And my first day at the academy, I had to introduce myself to the students and then dismiss them because it was March 16th, 2020, and that was when we were shutting the state down because of COVID. So that my first official act was to close the police academy, and I'm reminded of that routinely.
I thought it was St. Patty's Day.
Yeah. You know, I had some plans when I got to my appointment at Police Standards and Training, and COVID kind of took us off the rails a little bit. But I can tell you that any ideas or thoughts that I had were really put on hold in an effort to take a really deep dive into New Hampshire policing at the murder of George Floyd. And as Attorney Jefferson spoke about, the governor of our state did exactly the right thing, which was to put together the LEAC Commission to work on examining a number of things here in the state of New Hampshire with regard to policing and community relations and holding police officers accountable. We'll talk about that a little bit as we move through this program. But let me tell you about Police Standards and Training. We're the building that you see when you're driving north on 93. It's right next to the McAuliffe Planetarium. And I'm sure you folks would drive by the building on the highway and say, well, that's NHTI, and that's the McAuliffe Center, and I don't know what that other building is. And then you just drove by. And that's the truth. I'm going to try and fly this thing. Excellent. So we are an executive branch of the New Hampshire government. We were created through legislation in 1971, so we're really not that old. And we are the sole source for basic training and the primary source for in-service training for every law enforcement officer in the state of New Hampshire. Any single police officer or state-level corrections officer that you encounter has to come through our doors. We provide that training. We develop the training. We provide the training. We do a lot of things that have to do with not only the training, but the standardization and regulation of police officers. There's our mission statement. This mission statement was one of the first things that I put into play when I got there as the director. And it's really important for everyone to understand that our organization shapes, sustains, and strengthens competency and professionalism of every single New Hampshire law enforcement officer. And we do that in service to our state, to the people who live here, to the people who visit here. And this mission statement is everything to me. When I come to work every day, I remind myself of why I'm showing up. At every staff meeting, I make sure that we reiterate what our mission is at Police Standards and Training to make sure that we can stay focused on what we're trying to accomplish. These are our responsibilities, and we'll kind of go over them a little bit. Police Standards and Training and the council, which is appointed by the governor, and they're my bosses, we are responsible for establishing hiring standards for all law enforcement officers. So before somebody can even become a law enforcement officer, they have to meet certain hiring standards. Otherwise, they are not even entitled to become a police officer. We established a training curriculum for all law enforcement officers in the basic academies. And then we deliver that. So we run the police academy, we run the state level corrections academy, and we also run part-time academies as well. We deliver basic in-service training. Not only does a police officer have to finish their basic academy class, but annually, they are, in order to maintain their certification as a police officer, they must complete annual in-service training. And so we develop a lot of that training. We'll talk a little bit more about the actual training in a couple of slides. My organization is a regulatory body as well as a training body. So not only do we have the training side of the house, but we have the standards side of the house. And so we also conduct regulatory audits on police departments to make sure that those police agencies are doing exactly what they're supposed to do with regard to holding their officers accountable, making sure that their officers are receiving the appropriate training, and that they are meeting all the statutory and administrative rules, obligations of maintaining a proper police agency. This is something new. One of the responsibilities that we just took on a year ago was to oversee the investigations of police misconduct statewide. And this really fell into our wheelhouse because of the nature of our business anyway. We're a regulatory body. And so we now house and oversee the Conduct Review Committee. And that committee and our investigators and our attorney are responsible for overseeing any allegation of police misconduct as it's reported to our organization. We can talk a little bit more about that as well. We also provide state-level voluntary police agency accreditation. Accreditation is a process by which the agency will go through and meet a number of standards that are established that are national best practice standards. And this, many of these topics that you see on this slide were things that kind of came out of the LEAC Commission. We'll talk more about that. But we oversee that accreditation process. And finally and ultimately, we are responsible to certify and decertify law enforcement officers. In essence, we license them and we control their license, and we will take their license away if they commit any kind of police misconduct that's sustained through an investigation. You can see that my organization, which is very, very small, we have less than 40 employees. And my 40 employees, probably half of them are sworn employees, the people that are doing a lot of the heavy lifting here. And then the other half, not to say that it's not heavy lifting, they got to run the organization. We have business people, we have facilities maintenance, we have a lot of people that work in the background to make this thing go. But really, we have a very, very limited staff, and we do all of these things in service to the state of New Hampshire and the people who live here and visit here. Yeah, please. 2-minute warning, thank you. I know that Attorney Jefferson has spoken about the LEAC Commission, and this came about in the wake of the murder of George Floyd. Governor Sununu established the LEAC Commission. LEAC is an acronym that stands for Law Enforcement Accountability, Community, and Transparency. And the commission was directed to engage all interested and relevant public, private, and community stakeholders to develop recommendations and reforms that the commission deems necessary to enhance transparency, accountability, and community relations with law enforcement here in New Hampshire. So just like Julian was talking about, our meetings, when we met as a commission, we never met together. We never met each other except for over Zoom for the entirety of our work. And this was heavy, heavy lifting. And every day I would sign on to Zoom wishing that we were in a room together as opposed to just looking at each other's pictures on the video. We didn't meet until after we were done.
Yeah.
The first time we all met in person, we had already submitted our summary report to the governor. We met 26 times over 3 months, and every time that we met for between 6 and 8 hours. So we took a significant amount of testimony. We listened to a lot of testimony. We talked to each other. We, as Julian mentioned, and oftentimes we would have diametrically opposed positions on things. But I am a better man and I'm a better police officer for having been a member of the LEAC Commission. It was probably one of the most powerful things that I had the privilege of going through as a law enforcement officer. To that end, we were able to always find common ground. We were. We concentrated our efforts in 3 areas, really, and that was training, community relations, and investigating police misconduct. The outcomes, as you can see, we only moved things forward in that report if all of us agreed to it. So we had to reach unanimous decisions in order to put those recommendations on paper. And we took that very, very seriously. And there was times when we would have to bend a little bit, right? That's how you get things done. That's how you get things done, is you work to common ground and you listen. Really listen. I know that there was, I counted 48. You said 46, but I counted 48 recommendations. 24 of them landed on police standards and training. So, and at the time, I had 10 less people. So we were doing a little bit of scrambling. 4 are still in progress at police standards and training. Not to say that they're not done, that they're not accomplished, but I'm not happy with calling it done, and I want to move things forward a little bit more. And I can only say that that report serves as really a guide for continual improvement, and that's how I look at the LEAC report. So with that, I just wanted to kind of touch base on that a little bit. I hope you ask questions. I really look forward to trying to provide answers to anybody who has questions, and thank you very much.
And I think Michelle is coming up. All right.
It's like so little kids putting on vests and stuff.
All right, so a lot of good information, and now's our chance to, I'm going to get my steps in, running around the room to get your questions. And these are just a few guidelines we want to keep in mind. We want to get our questions out so we can get back to our panelists and keep hearing from them. Please be respectful, use respectful language, use the microphone. We really want our friends online to be able to hear, so wait till I get to you. I'll come as fast as I can. Listen generously to learn. Please don't interrupt. Share your airtime and be crisp with your questions. Be mindful that good intentions can still have a harmful impact. And honor confidentiality, which here means we hope you talk about what happened, but if you want to tell somebody else's story, please ask their permission. So I am scanning and we will, kick off. You have a question?
I do.
All right.
I can use my own mic, though, right?
One mic.
They didn't warn you about me.
Apparently.
Question for you, Skipper.
I knew it. I knew the judge was going to ask me a question.
How long has it been that New Hampshire has required law enforcement to be certified?
So I believe that the certification process started in 1971, although when it first started, the academy was held at the Weeks Traffic Circle, and they said the most difficult part of the 2-week academy, this is back in the early 70s, was to try not to fall off the bar stool at the end of the class. So that's, things have changed a little bit since then, Judge, yes.
So it's been actually required since then to be a law enforcement in New Hampshire to go to the PSNT?
That is correct,
Okay.
yes.
Hi, everyone. I'm Anthony Payton. My question is, as a formerly incarcerated person, I don't want to take up too much time. You guys could find it on my TED Talk, but as a formerly incarcerated person, I've hit every level of incarceration except for maybe Guantanamo Bay, and I want no part of that. But what I will say and what I will ask is, how are you, I love what I've heard, I love everything I've heard. How are you utilizing formerly incarcerated people to speak to the at-risk youth and to connect with them the same way that the Manchester Police Athletic League is doing it in Manchester? The reason I say that is because I remember, I'm from the housing projects of Brooklyn, New York. I remember my father being a Vietnam veteran. He lost his job, picked up a heroin habit. My mother's diabetes spiraled downwards, and one of my brothers and I got immediately into the drug trade because we didn't like what was happening in our home. And at 14 years old or 13 years old, I can recall selling my first vial of crack cocaine for $5 back in the 90s. And the police interaction was very adversarial. So we also have to invest in our youth, as well as people who are being released back into society. Are there any business people in the room really fast? Any business owners in here? Or anyone with a good business acumen? If there were, I would have loved to be at the age of 14 and someone would stop me and say, hey, listen, I understand that you don't want to sell poison. You're looking for a profit margin. If any business owner would have came to me at that age and said, hey, listen, everything you deal with in that business, I deal with in my business. Payroll, marketing, advertisement, overhead. Come to my used car lot. You move 3 of these vehicles, I'll show you what a spreadsheet looks like. I'll show you what a profit and loss statement looks like. I'll show you how to mitigate risk and all of those things. So I believe that we have to invest more in our youth, and I believe that we have to invest in the men and women that are coming out of prison who can stand on their past and have made the change, and because I believe that they can help the youth as well. So that's my question. Thank you.
So I can take that. I can give you one shining example is Joseph Lescaz, who served on the LEAC Commission with me and Director Skippa. Joseph Lescaz, at the age of, I believe, 16, was charged and convicted of a violent burglary, and he ended up spending over 7 years in prison. He was granted an early release by a Superior Court judge. He then partnered with the ACLU, and the ACLU put him on our commission. So he was sitting right next to a director of police standards and training. He was sitting next to a defense attorney. He was sitting next to the assistant attorney general for the state of New Hampshire. So I 100% agree with you that there has to be value in recognizing redemption and rehabilitation, and who knows it better than the man or woman who has gone through that path and gone on the other side. So we have also, with Joseph in his outreach, has paid it forward. And in the New Hampshire Bar Association, we've been running a series called Prison Series, where we've been highlighting people who are in the prison, who are making it into reentry and advocating for those barriers. So, so I can tell you there's a lot of significant movement, and I think that's almost single-handedly as a result of Joseph Lescaz and his work.
And to kind of jump on, one of the many things that we had to do after the recommendations came out of LEAC was to revisit our cultural diversity and procedural justice class, which was an appalling 2-hour block of instruction. It just was clearly inadequate. And one of the people that we immediately brought to the table to help develop that curriculum was Joseph. And Joseph was there along with members of the ACLU, along with a number of academics from the University of New Hampshire, Keene State College. We had the NAACP represented there as well. And collaboratively, we went from a real dismal 2-hour block of instruction to check a box to a 2-day block of instruction that involves panelists and panel discussions, much like we have going on today. So again, I didn't even, I should have called Joseph just to let him know we were doing this, but he's actually a friend of mine, and we stay in touch, and he's doing great things. Yeah.
I would just say, on a local level, we have Jason Corkum is one of the first person that comes to mind. He was a kid that I grew up with in Seacrest that got in trouble, assaulted a man, went to prison, went to California, got into guns, got into drugs, came back, cleaned up his life. We do talks. He's joined with the high school to talk to the kids there, but also the liaison to Housing Authority here. So very much like when I got my position, the former chief from Manchester was our interim chief. He brought me to Manchester as pal, and so we started doing things like the youth basketball league and things like that. But Jason wanted to do a fundraiser, so to get together with him and advocate with him, having been a childhood friend after everything that he went through, to get back out into the community was a no-brainer. I actually arrested him at Gillies one night when he first got back to Portsmouth, and I was like, he's like, run me, see if I got a warrant. And I was like, all right. And I was like, ooh, you got a warrant. And he's like, well, at least it's you. And I was like, all right, let's get out of here, right? You know, so I was like, man, why'd you tell me to do that? I wouldn't even think of it. But he's just, it's amazing, because I actually saw, you know, we both saw where we came from, and here we are, like two different spectrums. And then the organization, Hero Pups, they provide emotional support dogs, service dogs, comfort dogs to first responders and veterans. They use Merrimack County jail inmates to help train their dogs. So Mason has been trained, and then Mason and I recently just went to Rockingham County Jail, and we got to spend time with the inmates and the correction officers too, just to offer some support and just some fun. Playing ball with a dog in the courtyard is, you know, but that's where I come from as well, on the other side. But, you know, they say we kind of, it's the closest thing to doing time with you, is working with you in there.
I can tell you, Anthony, it's Anthony, right?
And congratulations too, sorry, but I mean, you're amazing. Thank you.
Anthony, the judicial branch, in the context of recovery courts, because I run the drug court in Rockingham County, uses people in those positions routinely in peer recovery. So we use them every day as peer recovery specialists. Many are actually in my drug court, and they are, when they're doing well, are actually mentors to the younger, the newer members in drug court, recovery court.
Okay, we have a question from the chat really quick. This is directed to John. If you could explain what CALEA accreditation is, like what Nashua PD maintains,
Portsmouth
and what
maintains.
and also Portsmouth PD, and what evidence exists that is a better relative to DEI criteria?
So I'll start as Rochelle's going through some stuff here. The CALEA, which is the acronym that was typed into the chat, stands for the Commission on Accreditation for Law Enforcement Agencies. CALEA is really an internationally recognized accreditation program, and it is very, very robust. There is a significant number of requirements that a police agency has to meet in order to become internationally recognized by CALEA. Portsmouth PD is recognized as an accredited police department through CALEA. There's probably about just shy of 30 police departments in the state of New Hampshire that have reached that level of accreditation. That is a monumental accomplishment. The downside to CALEA accreditation is that it is very expensive. And oftentimes, and you have to remember that the average police department in the state of New Hampshire has about 12 people on it. So if you think about it, that means that there's a lot of police departments in the state of New Hampshire that have 1, 2, or 3 people, you know, mostly north of Concord and over to the western side of the state, although Rockingham County has very, very small agencies in some of the towns. So we created something at a state level, and many states do have state-level accreditation programs, and we needed to tailor it so that it did not exclude those smaller agencies. We really want to encourage those larger agencies, those smaller agencies, to go through the accreditation process. And so we just created a program that did not in any way discriminate against those smaller agencies. CALIA standards require certain building specifications and certain staffing criteria. And those were things that we did not put into the state level accreditation, just to make sure that it was available to everybody. With regard to what the person spoke to in the chat, I am not familiar with any kind of national standards for diversity, equity, and inclusion, so I apologize, I can't speak to that. And Rochelle, I don't know if you had anything
No,
more.
you covered it. Thank you.
Hi, I'm Diane Stradling from Portsmouth. I had a question about the LEAC Commission reports. When that report went to the governor, I'm interested to know how he reacted. Was he supportive? And also if there's any pushback, political pushback on any of the recommendations that were made. Thank you.
So I'm going to start, and then I'm going to turn it over to Director Skippa. The governor wholeheartedly supported it. Once our recommendations came in, he threw a banquet for all of us. That was the first time that we met together. He fully endorsed all of them. The one that has been an issue where we have gotten some pushback from stakeholders is in the area of police data collection. As Judge Ruoff was talking about on the judicial side, there's this data exists, but it's not properly collated so we can see it. So you can't know what you don't know in regards to racial disparities, and there's no uniformity in what police agencies do. Some police agencies do a great job collecting data, some police agencies do none. So one of our recommendations was to have that as a uniform policy, and we've been hitting some roadblocks. Some of them are political from stakeholders. So that is the only thing in my view that is sort of a promise that has not been kept. Yeah.
And just to echo, the governor wholeheartedly, he immediately issued an executive order based on the summary report that the LEAC Commission had submitted. The banquet that he threw was, he referred to it as a working lunch. We were eating, but we were all taking notes, and he was giving us some very specific direction relative to, okay, you guys landed on a bunch of really important stuff, and now you need to make it happen. And I'll tell you, we really dug in deep, and we worked very hard to get those recommendations accomplished. And again, I'll go back to the notion that that LEAC report really needs to serve as kind of a guiding document. We can't be done with this, right? We have to continually improve and reevaluate whether we're still hitting the mark, or do we need to make changes. But yeah, the governor wholeheartedly move that forward. And again, I think it was a real crowning moment for, at least for New Hampshire law enforcement, with regard to a lot of the stuff that came out of the LEAC report.
Hi, I'm Susan, and I live here in Portsmouth, or actually grew up here. I think I know your mother.
Me too.
Well, I mean, we went to school together, I believe. I'm wondering how women of color come into this kind of violence with the police. I haven't heard anything nationally over the years. And also at the beginning of your the symposium, you talked about a lot of support for men from 14 to 24. It just seems like women have been left, maybe they aren't being murdered by police officers, but there are certainly other violent acts being taken against them in the system. So I was just curious if there are any statistics out there about women and policing.
I don't know about the statistics. I can speak from experience, and not just policing, but when I was a correction officer at Stratford County Department of Corrections, we had 2 female inmates that were sexually assaulted by the corrections officers, and that was brought to me actually outside of the jail. It was brought to my attention at like State Street Saloon from a person who had worked in the jail, who said that this was happening to their sister. And then we put things in motion. and they were convicted. I don't know about the statistics in Portsmouth or whatnot. I mean, when the complaints come in, there's a process for that. It's right on our website to report these things. But I think one of the huge issues is probably that things go underreported. I do a personal safety for women's class, and I actually talk about if you are pulled over by somebody, because we have had people that have impersonated police officers. I mean, even in Hampton, you know, close by, I think you see it on the news, you know, talking to them about pulling into a safe place, talking to them and saying, if you're not sure if this is a police officer, you don't feel safe to call 911, and 911 will be able to tell you any on-duty officer that is stopping a car at the time. So I don't have the statistics on that. I know that women, when I look at, you know, when I come in and look at the log, I know that I'm seeing more women being arrested and being aggressors, right? But, and also, like, I think you have to take into a lot of consideration, just kind of like what you said, there's a lot more challenges and things going on, and, you know, and it's just like, everybody's dealing with mental health issues and things like that. So sometimes seeing an arrest is one thing, and you don't really have all the information. That's what's done at the time. If it's a domestic situation, and especially in Portsmouth, look at how many bars we have. There's always, like, I mean, we talk about a drug issue, but man, alcohol is still a huge thing, and then you bring emotion into it. We shall arrest when it comes to a domestic violence type of situation, and we shall arrest the primary aggressor. There is no, you're not making some sort of, like, you can't use your discretion on something like that, because people have been killed. So, and, you know, and then you look at the population, and we have 51% women, so I think that comes into play too, if that's mostly who we're interacting with, if crimes are reported. But I don't have numbers.
Just quickly, were there discussions about women when you were putting this report or the LEAC together, or were they totally left out?
I don't, if they were left out, it was not done because we didn't want to talk about it. I don't know that it was a discussion point during the LEAC testimony that we received.
And I would agree with that. There wasn't we didn't have a specific conversation about that. I can tell you we had a pretty disturbing case with the Manchester Police Department several years ago that involved police officers taking advantage of women in a sexual way and in a controlling way. So I agree with you that it's something that certainly exists. It exists in the correctional setting, it exists out in the community, but we didn't have any recommendations specifically geared towards that. And the young adult court is not exclusive to young men. It's young men or women. It is just that in that sphere, it typically is young men. And I would completely echo what Detective Jones said. It's particularly in the area of domestic violence. I can tell you as a criminal defense attorney, you know, I mean, if I get a domestic violence case, I mean, I can tell you 90% of them are ultimately going to get dismissed because of the interplay of domestic violence where you have a woman who still is in a relationship, and so, you know, things don't move forward because people don't want to cooperate, and then this, how are they treated by the victim witness advocate, how are they treated by the law enforcement officer when they be investigated. So I certainly agree with you that it is an issue worthy of discussion and specific recommendations to address those issues.
I think too, another just a sort resource may be Haven. So that's our support services advocacy, because I think a lot of things, like I said, go underreported or don't even make their way to the police department, and they're a wonderful organization. I think they would probably keep some pretty good statistics on that.
Great. We have a question from the chat.
Oh, can I,
Go ahead.
can I just respond? I'll be real quick, sorry. On the, there has been an uptick in the number of women being arrested vis-a-vis the number of men in the courts, mainly due to the opioid epidemic, because it doesn't, and that has increased the number of times police have interacted with women and has arrested them. So that's a pretty well-known fact. I don't know exactly what the numbers are, but it's pretty significant.
So this question from the chat is for any of the panelists. In Manchester, we have SROs in middle and high schools, which is controversial. Is there any standard or LEAC recommendation about officers in schools?
Yes, there are. There's actually a number of recommendations that came out of the LEAC Commission. One of the first recommendations was that any school that was going to have a school resource officer, that's what SRO stands for, a school resource officer, needed to enter into the school, and the police department had to enter into a memorandum of understanding. And that memorandum of understanding had to clearly define the expectations of what that police officer was going to do and what they were not going to do within that school community. Secondarily, there was a number of trainings that the LEAC Commission felt was very important for school resource officers to receive prior to their being deployed as a school resource officer. There's actually a basic academy for school resource officers. It's referred to as NASRO, which is the National Association of School Resource Officers.
As a school resource officer?
Yeah. So they have to complete that. They have to complete a training called the Mirror Project, and they also have to complete training in effective police interactions with youth. I felt that that training was so important that I actually made that part of the basic academy. So not only do school resource officers have to attend that program of study, but in fact, every police officer that has graduated since the LEAC Commission report was put forth, that is part of their basic academy class now. And the hope is that we provide these officers with enough training and education to make sure that they understand that while they do have to interact with youth to possibly take a criminal enforcement action, that they do it in a way that is going to be reflective of the profession, in that you can still maintain dignity, and that's really what we should be striving for.
Yeah, I can just, as a school resource officer at the high school, that was in 2009, but we had a memorandum of understanding. I went through both the NASRO and the advanced one. I had missed graduating by quarter credit of English because I was having trouble at home. So going back to my school and then being the resource officer was pretty profound, but that was my first introduction into community outreach, because I learned that they were not always seeing me when something bad happens. You're able to develop a relationship with them, and everything does not end in an arrest. Everything that was once black and white became very gray, and I had to learn how to talk to kids, and I learned about their crisis, and I learned from the teachers and the guidance counselors, and I'm gonna be 48. I'll see kids that are now grown up that will still come up to me and be like, oh my God, you were my SRO. It is amazing. But we have a middle school resource officer and we have a high school one, and they're both pretty phenomenal, so.
So I would say very briefly, so this was one of those community conversations that needs to be an ongoing conversation, because as a community stakeholder, school resource officers should not be a thing. I think when you put law enforcement in a school, that's what a vice principal is for. That is what a guidance counselor is for. And the experiences can vary wildly. Very much it is black and white at times, and it is arresting children for stealing pizza in the cafeteria. It is arresting children for getting into a fight in the high school.
That's not what we do at our school. That's in the memorandum of understanding that we do not. We find out, why are you stealing and do you need help? And then let's get you the resources.
But these things do happen. I was a public.
Not at our school, but yes, you're right. There needs to be an ongoing conversation.
11 years in this state. And so these things do happen. And as a community, we need to ask ourselves, why do we need to have police officers in schools? I'm not that old. And there were no police officers in schools. This is part of us over policing. So that is a conversation. And trust me, we will probably not agree on this panel.
Yeah, if somebody brings an AR-15 this year to Portsmouth High School, and then it was nice to have one that's already on duty at the school to combat that. So, there is, it's an ongoing, evolving conversation. Luckily, we've had good experiences, but there are absolutely, I'm never going to deny what you have to do to be there as a defense attorney for youth for things that should never happen. And, but there's a place sometimes.
I have one here and one here, yep. Okay.
All right.
We're probably going to run out of time.
Okay.
Go ahead.
Okay, I'm Sharon Hillman. I'm a family doctor, and I'll say at least once a week I'll have some 50 or 60-year-old guy who owns a small business, and he wants nothing more than to bring in a 14-year-old kid to train and turn the business over to, because he's getting old and he's getting tired. Question is, how do we get kids to go do this instead of sell crack? And quite frankly, these guys make 6 figures, so you'll do better working with a guy than you will whatever else, and you don't end up in jail. So, and these are all long-standing businesses. So the question is there some way for the community to work with these small business owners to transition the high school students into some sort of work study or community service, as opposed to whatever else high school kids get involved in doing?
Great, thank you.
I know our schools do a World of Works, and so I don't know how many days it is. I think it's 2, that they bring in professions from all over, chefs and people that have been chopped and things like that into the schools, and the kids get to go and mirror them at their businesses. So I think that's one step of it, but I think that's absolutely something great that we can do, especially when kids are looking for, when they have to do community service or something like that. We're often going, where do we, put the kids that have to do this community service? And I think that is a great idea to have some businesses that are saying they're willing to mentor, as well, so.
I will tell you that that would be a great idea for kids before they get a record, but what we really need are felony-friendly employers.
Yep.
I can fill your business with my drug court participants that would love nothing better than to get a clean slate and a fresh start.
Right.
And they're in their 30s.
Hi, I'm Sandy. First of all, I want to give kudos to the Black Heritage Trail for having this type of a conversation at a Tea Talk. Kudos to you guys. I have many questions, but one that I'm concerned about is what is being done to encourage people of color, men and women especially, to join the police force? What's actively being done out there?
What a wonderful, this is a terrific question, and I'm so happy that you asked it. I can tell you that nationally, we are suffering across the board with recruitment and retention. We cannot fill the seats of vacancies across the state and across the country for people to take on these positions. And I can tell you that a friend of mine, somebody that I've had the opportunity to work with for really my entire career, is Eddie Edwards, who's the Assistant Commissioner of the Department of Safety. And Eddie was a police chief for a while. Eddie worked for liquor enforcement for most of his career, and he worked in the corrections field as well. And he is a man of color. He has taken it upon himself to form a recruitment program to visit other states in an effort to create interest for people of color to come to New Hampshire to be law enforcement officers. He's gone to historically black colleges and universities to really kind of try to recruit people of color to come to New Hampshire. I was talking with one of the organizers before we started, Shelley, and she told me that she had retired to New Hampshire, and I said, that's very unusual. Most people don't retire to New Hampshire. They try to exit New Hampshire, someplace warm, right? Yeah. And even Eddie will tell you that some of the difficulty in being able to bring people to the state of New Hampshire is because of the lack of diversity. And so there are some people who don't want to come to New Hampshire because there is that lack of diversity and the kind of the rural area of where they might have to work. But I'll tell you, if there was ever a time for any person who is looking to join the field of law enforcement, now is the time to put your resume in, because anybody who is, who can meet those standards, they're going to get a job very, very quickly. yeah, we're struggling with recruitment and retention. And I can tell you right now, a police department, and I'll just pick XYZ police department, they might lose 10 people this year. Some of them are leaving before retirement. They just want to get out of the business. Those 10 vacancies, the police agency can only find 2 people to fill those 10 spots. And then the next 6 months, they lose 5 more. They can only find 1 to replace. So we're slowly hemorrhaging the ranks. The other thing that is a bit concerning is that, we really want the best and brightest, and the best and brightest are seeing better opportunities in the private sector. And not to say that the cops we are getting are bad, they're terrific, and I applaud all of them for stepping up to the line, but we're just really getting smashed right now in terms of trying to get people into the business. And we have to do a little bit of work ourselves to kind of shine all the positive stuff. I mean, and Rochelle's a wonderful example of all of the good things that law enforcement does. And we really have to do a better job of getting that message out as well.
Just like cost of living, that's definitely something that's hard. But we do citizen police academies. We have a cadet program, so for our youth, ages 14 to 21, and then they can actually go to like a state one. That's Officer Codwell in the background, everybody. This is his beat, so I looked through the window and I was like, is everything okay? He's like, yeah, everything's fine. But also, we do take lateral transfers. This is one of our challenges at our department. We take lateral transfers from other departments. You want me to stop?
We're about to lose our feed phone line, so we have to stop. So I want to thank our panel. It was a great panel discussion and all that you brought to us. My name is Dwight Davis. I'm a board member of the Trail. I want to thank Jerry Ann and her staff for this tea talk and all the work they do. And I'd like to think we have some board members here. Raise your hand if you're a board member, please. They do awesome work here in support of Jerry Ann. And the volunteers. Volunteers. Would you raise your hand, volunteers? Raise your hand. Thank you so much. And finally, we want to thank the Portsmouth Public Library and New Hampshire Humanities for sponsoring this program. Thank you.